Coming to paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. Take a trip into the macabre world of goth modeling in the new millennium in this all-new Spinsterella story. Pre-order your copy of Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere. One of my viewers wanted to know if I think America and the West are headed for another Great Depression. Now, I'd have to say America and the West are currently in the middle of a depression because we really did not come out of the Great Recession. No, we really didn't come out of the Great Recession of 2008 in a way that made the economy healthy because we lost a lot of industries and many of our businesses are basically these days based on speculation. Now, America's economy basically has been in a state of decline as I see it since the 1970s, where America started to pull away from manufacturing. And as we sent most of our manufacturing overseas to countries like China and looked to transition into a service-based economy during the era of Bill Clinton, that really triggered the decline of America's overall economy because instead of us focusing on being competitive and innovative as related to creating new businesses and new industries, what America really focused on was looking to, again, do everything on the cheap. And as we had a lot of older people looking to do things on the cheap, they basically became complacent. And as we became complacent, we lost our competitive edge, as other countries wound out here becoming more competitive than America and the West. Now, when it comes to America and the West, they basically have had their economies on a state of decline for, I say, the last 40 to 50 years as we've transitioned out of manufacturing. And because manufacturing, what made it competitive is people were focused on innovation, they were focused on creation. But as American businesses started to have their executives looking to, again, do things on the cheap, they started to focus more on providing services and thought a service-based economy would be stronger than a manufacturing economy. And this is something that I read in a book class that I took back in 1994 in college called Organizational Behavior. And in that book, it basically proved the point where they said that as America came out of manufacturing and went into service, the only jobs that would be available would be either high skill, high tech jobs, which would pay the most money, or service jobs that would pay anywhere from $4.25 to $7 an hour. And if you adjust the money for inflation, with the minimum wage now being $15 an hour, the wages are anywhere from for spending the $15 to $25 is spending just like the $4.25 to $7 an hour. And America isn't really creating, again, any sort of jobs because we don't really focus on teaching our kids to be focused on high skill jobs. No, they're mainly focused on, again, taking majors in things like basket weaving and things like those liberal arts programs, and that's not really creating innovation. No, we don't have any sort of infrastructure to create innovation, and in order to create innovation, you need to have a platform for manufacturing, and you also need to have infrastructure where people can learn these skills. But America's whole infrastructure is a complete mess because we listened to the Clinton administration when they talked about, again, going into a service-based economy. But the critical question people have to ask is, what are you serving to the public? That was the big problem that undermined America's overall economy long term because we're focused on service-based businesses, but service-based businesses, again, cannot be going out here and scaled up and sent into other countries to, again, be places where things can be made. No, in order to really build wealth, you need to have a manufacturing infrastructure, and we sold that all away in the 1970s and the 1980s when Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan decided to, again, support things like going out here and sending our manufacturing overseas, not to mention Bill Clinton and the NAFTA agreement. And all of those agreements basically, again, did damage long term to America's economy, along with bills that destroyed competition, such as repealing the Glass-Steagall Act or the Telecom Act of 1996. All of this did damage to America's economy as we speculated on the idea that dot-coms would be the next big boom. But when it came down to dot-coms, what these were basically starting a trend as related to people going out here and creating speculative markets as related to the economy. And these speculative markets were basically run on people who were running on ideas. And as they got money from venture capitalists and hedge funds, they basically, again, spent all that money. And again, people thought that these dot-coms were going to be a boom, but eventually a lot of them went bust because a lot of these businesses really did not have a good business plan. And as they didn't have a good business plan, what happened is after the recession of 9/11, which really was a recession that started in 2000 because the dot-com boom went into a bust, that's where we had people no longer looking to, again, create innovation, no longer looking to create innovation, but looking to go out here and run on gimmicks like the dot-com boom, which is basically a lot of speculation. And as those speculators came out of that market, this is where we got the hedge funds and the venture capitalists looking to invest in real estate, and they created another gimmick as related to the subprime mortgage mess. Now, the subprime mortgage mess was a complete disaster that I sat down and I remember saying that this cannot be sustainable. It's not sustainable because, yes, you have people giving out mortgages, but you were giving mortgages to people who had no job, no income, no revenue stream. And again, because the venture capitalists were coming in and again, funneling a ton of money and flooding it with money, people were out here buying homes. And again, all of this wound up crashing around 2008. And as we went from the subprime mortgage mess, we went into the Great Recession, a Great Recession that was done because we were going into all of this speculation. Again, speculation because the service-based economy could not sustain the country all by itself. And as things went on, we saw industry starting to collapse. We saw financial services collapse in 2008. We saw Bear Stearns go out of business. We saw all of the automakers basically go bankrupt once more because, again, you had a lot of people speculating. And again, speculating is a part of what's destroying Western economies because people are not making good investments as related to business, no different than what was happening during the time of the stock market crash back in 1929. Now, that stock market crash basically happened because many of these people were speculating, buying stocks with credit, and as they bought stocks with credit, a lot of those people wound up going into over-investing into stocks based on speculation, and eventually what happened is the stock market basically crashed because the market was flooded with so much money but have no actual tangible results. And as all those margins came in, all those people wound up quickly winding up in debt as these stocks basically crashed. And the same thing is happening as related to a cycle with the American economy and the Western economy. You have people who will go out here and speculate on something, pour a whole lot of money into it without an actual business plan or an actual direction. And as they speculate on things, whether it be dot-coms, whether it be real estate, again, they overvalue things. And this is a pattern that I basically saw when I was coming up. When I saw the comic book boom turn into a bust, you had a bunch of speculators coming in, pumping up the price of everything far beyond its actual value, pumping up the value, not understanding that what makes something valuable is supply and demand. And if there is a limited supply, there will be more demand. And again, that leads to the value going up. But when you have a speculator market, you have people running on feelings. And as they run on feelings, what they do is they go out here looking to pump up the price of something, pump it up more than it's worth, not understanding that the infrastructure isn't there as related to things being scarce. That's what they don't understand. That's what they didn't understand during the dot-com boom. These dot-coms really were not worth that much. but they poured lots of money into them, and that made people think, oh, this is going to be the next big thing. And then when that failed, those same hedge fund guys and same venture capitalists started pouring money into real estate, and again, artificially inflating the value more than it's worth, similar to what happened with comic books in the 90s, pumping up the value worth more than it's worth. And then as people started again speculating, they started again looking to spend more money, looking to again go out here and go into bidding wars for this property that wasn't worth that much, and driving up the value more than it's worth, and again spending these things. And what's happening right now is that with real estate, those prices are pumped up because we've got venture capitalists hoarding property. They're hoarding property thinking it's got value, but if people don't have the money to buy them, because the average American salary has not gone up, even though you've raised the minimum wage to $15, the money still spends like $4.25 to $7 an hour, and the average person only makes $45,000 a year to $35,000 a year. So they can't even afford to go out here and buy these items because the prices have been so pumped up. It's like everything is on steroids. And again, when a person is on steroids, their muscles are inflated and overworked, and eventually what happens to that person is that as their body looks big on the outside, it's on the inside it's deteriorating, and they basically have the heart of an 80-year-old person. They have the heart of an 80-year-old person. They could be 20 years old because their body has to work that much harder. And the speculators basically make the economy work that much harder because they drive the value up of everything. And they are basically one of the reasons why we have a lot of inflation. The other is that Congress basically poured a lot of money into the economy with those $1,200 and $1,600 things that they gave out after COVID. That's one of the reasons why we have this inflation. It's between them and the speculators. The speculators, again, drive up the prices, and again, the government again pours money in, and again that lowers the value of the dollar, and again lowers the value of the dollar to the point where the dollar becomes worth less. And again, as people are making less money, because again you might have a guy making $15 an hour, but again it's spending like the $5 an hour, and again it has less value. And again, it costs now $50,000 to buy a car. It costs over $1 million to $500,000 to buy a house. And the economy cannot sustain itself, as related to this whole dysfunctional infrastructure created by these speculator booms. These speculator booms, which basically feel like a manic depressive cycle. Again, you have these moments of mania where these people, again, go out here and drive things up, and then as they drive them up, we get a depression cycle because these people, again, don't know how to function in an economy, because like a gambler, they become addicted to, again, the values going up, but not understanding that if the price goes up, eventually you're going to have a down period. And we just recently saw this transpire with the whole situation as related to streaming in Hollywood. Hollywood basically speculated on streaming because they saw Netflix making billions of dollars, not understanding that Netflix was making billions of dollars on its streaming service, not because of the subscriptions, but because they were paying the studios for content. And as the studios saw the money Netflix was making, they speculated with the help of venture capitalists and hedge fund people that streaming would be the next big thing. But the streaming became the next big bust because of the addictive cycle of spending, became the next big bust because of the addictive cycle of spending, because many of these business people don't really do much critical thinking. No, because they're in their mania, what they do is they act on impulse. And as they act on impulse, what they do is they go out here and pour money into something, pour a lot of money into something on emotion without ever looking to look at critically at the details to see if this is a viable thing to invest in. And examples of this were shown at Disney with all the different Disney Plus programs. I mean, I remember hearing, as related to the She-Hulk show, She-Hulk Attorney at Law, they had a head writer who basically had no experience in screenwriting, no experience um, in law, no experience as related to comics, again, no experience whatsoever, but she has been, again, put in charge of this show, no different than the dot-coms of the 2000s and the early 2000s, where they thought, oh, we got a dot-com, no real plan for how to do business. I go in depth on this in one of my books, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer, where I talk about how many of these dot-com businesses, again, had no business plan. And the same thing happened with the subprime mortgages. The same thing happened with the streaming. Again, you get this rush of individuals who come into this place, a business place. These venture capitalists go out here, pour a lot of money into these people, but none of these people have any sort of business experience. None of them have any sort of business plan. And as they go out here and make their business ventures, what happens is that that whole business completely collapses. It completely collapses because you've got inexperienced people, again, given a bunch of money, but they have no understanding of how the market works. They have no understanding of how the business works. They have no understanding of how anything works. And we've had cycle after cycle of this going on, and sadly, because we've got a lot of complacent people at the top at many of these businesses, they can't see the vicious cycle going on as related to America's economy and how it's going into a state of decline. They can't see how America's economy is going into a state of decline because many of these people have become complacent. They have lost their competitive edge. Again, America has lost its competitive edge because we really don't go out here and innovate, and we don't understand that wealth is built by tangible things, because what builds wealth is not something virtual, it's something fixed and tangible. And yes, dot-coms and other businesses, yes, you can speculate on them for a moment, and yes, they will boom, and you will go out here and give people lots of jobs with big salaries, but the whole thing is they're really flashy and they have no substance, and that's what really the whole tech age is all based on. And again, America and the West really, again, they are on a road for another depression because we've got this manic depressive economic cycle. Meanwhile, those in the East, in countries where they actually do manufacturing, countries like China, countries like Korea, countries like India, they are and Japan, they basically are having a cycle where they're basically starting to go out here and gain momentum because the West has basically lost its competitive edge. The people have no hunger or passion. Again, they are basically with their face in front of a screen and not really thinking about working on the next big invention or the next big innovation. No, what we're getting here in America is we've created a consumer-based economy, and what's happening to the consumer-based economy is it's being consumed at this point. Again, consumed at this point because you don't have anybody focusing on competing. Now, you have people saying that, oh, President Trump wants to bring back manufacturing, but again, you don't have the skilled workers. Again, we have not been developing skilled workers because we have become complacent. We've got a bunch of people going to school where they don't even have any sort of academic literacy. I mean, the average American only has a 6th grade education, even with a college degree, because we've dumbed things down. And that's, again, because we've lost our competitive edge. We've lost our competitive edge. We've lost our hunger. And that's what will lead to, again, us having a depression. A depression because, again, these manic cycles, they cannot go on. They're not sustainable because we don't have the innovators. We don't have the creators. And again, what we do in this country is stifle creation. We stifle creation because we've got complacent people at the top who basically want to stay in these positions, like Bob Iger. The man is 70 years old. He's running Disney straight into the ground because he does not know how to innovate. He goes out here and buys companies like Marvel and companies like Lucasfilm and looks to make old IPs instead of going out here looking to go to creators like myself for new IPs. And that's really hurting companies. Same thing with David Zaslav at Warner Brothers Discovery. He basically wants to, again, go out here and purge everything, and again, is not looking to invest in anything new or innovative. And again, basically, America is because we have these complacent older people who have no passion, no spark, no entrepreneurial drive. Again, they choke the life out of this country. And again, you can't have an economy grow with a bunch of old dead companies with old dead leadership. And again, you can't have a country grow with old dead people. Like they're talking about these tariffs. Again, that's an archaic model. Again, you have people, the sad part about America most of all is we've got people still at the top stuck in the 20th century, 25 years into the 21st century. And as we are 25 years into the 21st century, they're still wanting to go back to the golden ages of the 1950s and the 1980s. But the world has completely changed. And as the world has changed, they're still trying to take the world back to a fantasy that was created by Madison Avenue in Hollywood of these golden ages in the 50s and the 80s. But we are, again, 70 years from the 50s, going on 80 years. We are 40 years going on 50 years from the 80s. And again, I look at the world, and again, it's completely changed. And I'm seeing how the world is changing because, again, the wealthy, again, went out here. And again, they wanted to make the world in a fixed state. They wanted to make the world in a fixed state. And again, they wanted to make the world in a fixed state because they wanted a smooth world where they could continue to maintain power. But what is happening to them is no different than what happened to the slave masters and the plantation owners back in the 1850s. Now, in the 1850s, we were the starting of the Industrial Revolution. And as we had the Industrial Revolution in the North, these Southerners wanted to go out here and maintain their old Southern tradition. And as they looked to maintain their old Southern tradition, they basically weren't seeing how trade had changed. Trade had completely changed. The English were no longer buying our cotton. The French were no longer, or the Germans were no longer buying anything. No, they were establishing their own empires and their own colonies in other countries in Asia, and finally discovering India, because what really drove everybody to come to America is because they wanted to go to India so they could get that cotton. And eventually the English did get that cotton, and that made American cotton obsolete, and it made American industry obsolete as related to the slave trade. And again, those slave owners basically found themselves in a world that was completely changing, and instead of adapting to change, they continued to maintain their old Southern tradition that led to the Civil War. And again, the South never recovered, and I have to wonder if America is on a road to not recovering, because we've got a lot of old heads who are still stuck in the past and not really seeing a future. Again, running on gambling like speculation, like .coms, speculation like the subprime mortgages, speculation like streaming, no different than people buying stocks on margin, all of them in a gambling, turning our economy into a gambling spot, a poor man's jackpot. Again, some people will make a little money at the beginning, but will wind up going broke towards the end. No different than this whole speculation with the electric car. Again, Elon Musk made a lot of money on electric cars, and we now see that the technology is not anything that is sustainable. Again, people, in this country, they have a cycle of mania that leads to economic depressions. Mania where they go on a boom that turns into a bust. And again, started to see this way back in the 90s with the comic book boom. I mean, the comic book boom was an indicator to the .com boom, which was an indicator to the subprime mortgage boom, which was an indicator to the streaming boom. And again, the way we invest money is like a drug addict. We basically, again, you get through these mania cycles when you're high, and then you crash when you're low. And again, I look at America's economy, and again, we definitely are headed for another Great Depression, because we really don't innovate anything. We've got, again, I'll repeat it once more, complacent people at the top who don't know how to compete, don't know how to bring our best to anything, don't invent anything new, don't try to do different things like I do in writing. What I try to do When I started writing a book called Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, I learned how to modify the second act of a 3-act story to make it flow faster so that the story could basically wrap up much quicker, because second acts are usually slow and they can slow down a story, but I learned how to quicken the pace and move it along. Again, innovation is something America doesn't invest in. No, we basically play it safe, and as we play it safe, again, the rest of the world is taking risks, and because they're taking risks, most of the West is headed for a Great Depression. Again, a Great Depression because we don't go out here and innovate, create, or support people who do this. No, we focus on speculation. And again, if you focus on speculation instead of innovation, your economy can't grow. While there may be risks with exploring innovation, again, this is something where you can see where actual tangible results are and can create tangible business models. Again, tangible business models that can be scaled up, tangible business models that can be replicated, tangible business models that can turn into something of substance. That's what we've lost here in America and the West. We've lost that ability to be innovative, and that's why you have nothing really going on. I mean, you can't make something great if you're caught up in complacency. And again, white supremacy is all about complacency. White supremacy is not about competition. It's about giving goodies, giveaways, and guarantees to people to stay in the same spot. But if you stay in the same spot, you're not going to grow. You're going to stagnate as a country, no different than what happened to Russia during the communist period. Again, you're going to stagnate, not going to grow, and that's what's choking the life out of America. And I believe we are on a road to another Great Depression that will be just as worse as the Great Recession. Now, this was a video requested by a viewer, and if you want to request a video, you can drop a donation for a minimum of $15 to the PayPal or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if I know something about that subject, I'll make that video for you. And if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct imprint, like Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer, that talks all about the dot-com boom that happened in the year 2000, and see how that dot-com boom, again, led to one of the great collapses of the 21st century, you can pick up that book on Amazon.com, along with other books that I have written. I've written over 80 books, and you can find that book and many other books on the SJS Direct imprint on Amazon.com and other online booksellers. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteemed Season of the Witch Girl. The aspiring angel takes on a wicked teenage witch in this action-packed, all-new Esteemed series adventure. Pick up your copy of Esteemed Season of the Witch Girl in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, A Thorn in My Side. The man who rules the world takes on an agent from the CIA, from the Black Boule, in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' A Thorn in My Side in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.